So there you go. There's something a little bit different to start the session off today. A few little fluffy moments, but you know, getting there. Yeah, I love playing classical guitar. I never get to play classical guitar so much anymore because it's not like something that's part of my general work kind of guitar playing stuff. So we can start off soon with some beginnery kind of a stuff, or perhaps a little bit of a we could do a little bit of random stuff, I guess, first, actually, because it's not quite 6 o'clock yet. So if you've got any like kind of slightly random stuff, we can maybe have a little look at that. I can have a look at my little question sheet, question buffer. There we go. What was that song? That song, Brenada, was called Mazurka Choro by Hector Villa-Lobos. Definitely worth looking up Villa-Lobos because he makes loads of incredible incredible music. Lots of great guitar stuff that you should definitely be checking out. So at some point I might do a lesson on it, and in fact I'm not even sure, he might be out of copyright now, which would be an interesting thing, because that means I could give you the sheet music, but I'm not certain. Just a general reminder of what's going on with the questions and the Q&A and how to do stuff. Please don't repeat questions over and over again, because you'll just get blocked, basically. Because it kind of interrupts the stream a lot if you're just reposting your question time and time again. Please don't use all capitals, because it's kind of like the internet version of shouting. It's kind of rude, so don't do it, please. Don't swear in the chat stream, because there are probably young people watching this and it's inappropriate, and you'll get banned straight away for any use of excessive swearing. try and keep it gone altogether. I'd say that, you know, any swearing use of the properly bad words will get you a ban straight away. So please don't. And also just saying play this guy or play that guy or play this song or play that song, it's not really, you know, it's not very exciting for me. It's not very exciting for you. It's, you know, it's just silly. So because I'm not going to just sit here and just try and attempt to play riffs that you call out. It's not really helpful. Oh wow. Bit of a heavy metal sound going on there. I was just practicing earlier on doing some Whiddly guitar, which I don't normally do. Not normally into doing Whiddly, but I was just having a bit of fun. It's not the sound I want. What's the one I want? That one will do. So I've got just a few different sounds here. A lot of you guys have been asking about the sounds that I'm using. So I'm not using an amp at the moment. I'm using this thing called a Kemper Profiler, which is like copies different amps. Kind of like the idea that Line 6 do with this modelling thing, but I think it's miles ahead of any of the other stuff. Axe Effects is obviously up there. I think Kemper and Axe Effects from my listening is pretty close runners. I slightly prefer the Kemper, but I prefer the effects and stuff that you can get in a Axe Effects. I'm just hoping Kemper are going to improve that aspect of their system sometime soon. That's what I would be really hoping. And regarding the other thing to do with the questions is this first hour is mainly to do with beginner type questions, and the moderators grab the really good questions, the ones that are, you know, maybe not the ones that get asked every week or whatever, that kind of questions might not make it onto the mod list, but the mods are copying and pasting the really good questions into another document that you guys can't see that I can, and I get to as many of those questions as I can. I can't get to every question, of course, and I kind of skip between looking at that and looking directly at the live feed, because the live feed is like 20 seconds behind me talking. So if I say do it now and then I look, then it takes ages for those things to get onto the screen for me to see. So let's crack into a few of these beginner questions. How do you overcome performance anxiety? When I go blank when I play in front of people, including my instructor. I'm 38 and shouldn't probably be so nervous. Well, okay, age isn't something that changes with getting nervous, and I think a lot of it is trying to find. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my camera picture and make sure that I'm staying in shot, but I can't find it now. I'll do it that way. There's definitely an interesting thing that happens when you play. You know, I even had a little bit when. Because other thoughts start creeping into what should just be purely thinking about the music. When I just played that little classical thing for you before, about the halfway mark, I was like, "Oh, really? I should have practiced this." I started thinking I should have practiced this bit, and the next bit. I wasn't 100% certain that I knew what the note was on the starting note for the next section. And as soon as you start thinking about that sort of stuff, that's usually where mistakes happen, and it becomes like a vicious cycle that if you make a mistake, then you start thinking about the fact that you made a mistake, and again, you're thinking about stuff that's not to do with the music, and that's usually, for me anyway, what I find interrupts stuff. So the first thing I always say about being nervous is preparation, because if you're properly prepared, you'll find yourself a lot less nervous than if you're not really sure what you're doing. You know, I've definitely found in gigs over the years, if I'm a bit not feeling like I've really done my homework properly, and I'm a bit sketchy about what's going to happen, am I definitely going to know what the next chords are or whatever, I'm a lot more nervous than if I've practiced up properly and done stuff. I think that's a good what is it, the 5 P's: prior preparation prevents piss poor performance. 6 P's. So I think that's a really good little thing. It's used in lots of different circles, not just in music stuff. But making sure that you're prepared for what it is that you're going to do is a good idea. You know, if you're worried about your gear or worried about that you've forgotten the song or whatever, you're going to be a bit nervous. So definitely preparation solves a lot of stuff. It doesn't stop still sometimes just that feeling of tension when things happen. You know, when you're playing or recording, often it's called red light fever as well. And probably a good bit of advice I can give for any of you guys, recording yourself as much as you can. I think recording yourself is a really, really grand idea. And as well as giving you the benefit of hearing yourself back, it gets you used to the idea of having to perform at a particular moment and get it right. Which just the pressure of recording yourself even at home in the bedroom might trigger some of that anxiety and nervousness. The thing for me that I'm always trying to go for, and as I said when I was just playing for you before and my head started just twittering into like other thoughts, is trying to get back into the moment. And some of you may have noticed I put a thing on Facebook the other day. I've been doing this mindfulness meditation, and I must admit I really don't like the name for it. Mindfulness sounds a bit icky to me. I wish it was called something else, but it's basically this meditation where you really try and zone in on a particular thing. And for me personally, my mind flits around all the time about stuff I've got to do on the website, or writing this song, or doing that arrangement, or you know, all of that sort of stuff on top of like normal family life and things that you think about. So I have a lot of trouble staying in the moment all the time. If I'm having a conversation with somebody, I'll be talking to them, but my mind might be flitting around thinking about what stuff I've got to film later that week, or whether this is going to work out properly, or whether I should do a deal with this guy for this thing, and you know. And I'm finding this mindfulness really helpful for staying in the mode. And just then when I was practicing, when I was playing that classical thing, I managed to put my attention back into just thinking about what I was playing, and straight away all of those other thoughts went away, and I felt a lot more comfortable with it, you know. So that would be my thing, that my recommendation would be make sure that you're prepared properly, and then maybe explore some sort of meditation-y sort of thing where you can clear out your mind of all of the other stuff and learn to focus intently on the one thing that you want to play. So that's kind of not really maybe a beginner question, but it's kind of related. Okay, I'm looking to buy an amp soon. Should I get a Line 6 for the versatility, or a Marshall as a safer bet for my sound? Okay, and also that was from Ramanathan. Sorry if I'm reading from quite far away and the writing's little. I might need glasses. And the other question is from HBFSM92. Can you give me some advice on amplifiers? I have a Fender Mustang too, but I think there is better stuff out there. I have a Mexican Fender Strat and I'd like to get the most out of it. Thanks a lot. Okay, so I think a really important thing to realise for most guitar players, not just beginners, is that for me the instrument is the thing that I'm in direct connection with. So for my guitar, I'm much more concerned about the feeling of the instrument than the sound of the instrument when it comes to the instrument itself, the guitar itself. With the exception being classical guitars, acoustic guitars, because they're one and the same. But for electric guitar particularly, the electric guitar, I want it to feel nice for me. And most of the sound comes from an amplifier, and you can prove that by if you go into a guitar store and pick up the most expensive guitar that they've got in the shop that they'll let you play and plug it into the cheapest amplifier, it's going to sound really terrible. Whereas if you take a really rubbish guitar and plug it into a great sounding amplifier, it's going to sound great, if not really good. You know, maybe not as good as the really expensive one, but amps are a pretty big deal. Now, the choices that you have to make on an amp are a few, and mostly it's going to be driven by budget. So when you get into the kind of your Line 6y type amps, I've never been a massive fan of Line 6, I've got to say, and I'm sorry if Line 6 are watching ever, because I think they do a fine line of stuff, but I've just never it's never got me excited, their sounds. I found the Fender Mustang in that kind of realm of modelled stuff. I found I liked it more, right? And that's just a personal thing. Lots of people will prefer the Line 6 stuff, and that's fine. Line 6 have made some fantastic pedals as well over the years, so I don't want you to think that I'm having a Line 6 bashing competition, because like those big, the green and purple pedals that they had, the multi-effects things were fantastic pedals. I've got a green one somewhere, not here. Yeah, when the next step up from that really is going for some sort of valve amplifier. And the one that I always recommend for people as being my personal choice of a starter valve amplifier would be the Fender Blues Junior, because it's really simple. It takes pedals really well, so lots of different pedals will work well with it. And it's just a really, really good valve sound. So with the valve sound, you get a slightly different breakup, the way the notes kind of, the distortion, you get that nice mid-level distortion. So modeling amplifiers like 9.6 and the Mustang and those kind of things are good for like a really heavy metal sound, but they were never much good at a bluesy kind of sound for my ears. Whereas a valve amplifier has got that nice little kind of breakup bit where it's kind of slightly dirty, but it's not distorted, kind of a thing. And so really I think that's kind of where it's at, is looking at valve amplifiers. Now, particularly lately, there's a lot of, if you've got a bit more money to spend, there's a lot more kind of what they're calling boutique amplifiers, which are pretty much all valve amplifiers. And there's a lot bigger range of that you get. The ones I particularly like, I use a Lazy J20 a lot. It's difficult because the camera that you're watching me from is in my laptop and it's all plugged into loads of stuff, so I can't just pick it up and move it around and show you stuff. And the Lazy J is all set up over here. But I use that a lot. In this particular studio right now, I've got a problem with some magnetic fields emanating from a railway which is behind the building, and I get this really funny, I don't know if you hear it, if I put this on a distorted setting, you might hear this sound. I mean, it's not very interesting, but anyway, it doesn't work with amplifiers, so I'm having to use this thing called a Kemper profiler at the moment. If I put on this heavy metal setting, you can hear it? Oh, I need to turn the noise gate off. Yeah. So if you can hear that noise, it's a pretty horrible noise. And that is coming from the railway, right? Yeah, that's way too distorted to be having as a general sound. So I'm using this thing called the Kemper Profiler right now. I must say, if I was just playing at home and I wanted a load of really good sounds, I'd probably get a Kemper Profiler, right? Over an amp or anything else. I know loads of kind of session guys, proper session guys as well, not slouchers, right? They're serious, as good as it gets session guys in London, that are using the Profiler, you know, as a kind of amp for particularly for kind of pantomimes and West End shows and that kind of thing. A lot of people use the Axe FX as well. But if you're playing at home, it can be a pretty cool thing to have a good range of sounds at whatever volume you like, or with headphones. Because one of the things you'll find with valve amps is when you get into valve amp territory, you've got to kind of play them a bit louder to make them sound really good. You know, quiet valve amps don't generally work as well, because it's that the getting driven thing that seems to make such a difference. I'm not exactly sure why that is, to be completely honest with you, but there's definitely a difference to be had. Hang on, I'm just going to bump that forward a little bit more. That's it. So yeah, when it comes to exactly which ones, I think you just want to go to a shop where there's a few amps and try some stuff out, because, you know, me saying, oh, you should get this one or you should get that one's kind of irrelevant. It depends on your guitar and your relationship with the guitar and the amp. Particularly if you've got a guitar that you know that you really like the feeling of. You know, if I'm trying amps, I'll often take a guitar to the store, a guitar that I know, and I know what it sounds like in my other amps, so I know what to expect, because there's nothing worse than go to a store, playing in grabbing a guitar off the wall, playing an amp, sounds great, get home, plug your guitar into the same amp, it doesn't sound the same. So it's not hard. Most shops won't mind you. Well, they should definitely not mind you taking a guitar in to try out an amp. If they did, if they moaned about it, I'd tell them to go home. Probably not using those exact words. So anyway, let me just keep going on a couple more of these beginner questions. Oliver said, is it necessary to get a guitar teacher, or can you learn guitar on your own using the books, internet and so on? So well, I think that you can your own these days. Like you couldn't years ago, because well, the internet wasn't there and it wasn't as comprehensive as it is now. I think the danger on the internet now is that there's so many things presented in such a random way it can be difficult to know where to go, and that's kind of what I hope to do on my site, is to structure that journey a little bit more, so you know that you do this, and then after you've done that, that you could look at these and then you could look at that. Because it can be frustrating, I think, for people if they're learning to do stuff, but then they find that they're stuck, or they can't play this or they can't play that, and they feel like they've not improved, but maybe they're just looking at the wrong material. Having an in-the-person teacher can be very helpful if you get a good one. There are plenty of good teachers around, great teachers around. There are some pretty awful ones too, so you need to find yourself a good teacher, basically. That's part of the deal, is to try and find a good teacher. So asking around, and asking other guitar players you know in the area if they know anyone who's good, and then go for a lesson. And if you don't like them, leave. Not leave on the spot, that would be a bit rude, but finish the lesson, but don't come back. And don't get into this paying for 10 at once stuff when you first start either. I think that's a very heinous idea. So just go for a lesson with a teacher and see if you connect with them or not. Do they like the music that you like? Do they look like they've got a plan? One thing I think that's always to be wary of is when people say that theirs is the only way to do it. And generally people who slag off other people a lot, I find that it's just not a great place to be coming from as a teacher. I think you should be trying to help a student keep their mind open to lots of different ideas and lots of different ways, and helping them become individual and unique as a musician themselves. So saying that this is the only way, I think is not a happening kind of a pathway. So I'd be wary of teachers that say that their way is the best way and everyone else is rubbish. So most teachers should be confident in their on their delivery of stuff. Like, I think I have a really good method and it's going to be helpful and hopefully fun and blah blah blah. But that doesn't mean that I don't think anyone else can, because I think there's lots of other guys with other methods that are going to be really good as well. It depends on the student, So if you're going to go for a teacher, go for a lesson, see if you can feel a connection with them and if they look like they've got a plan for you, because there are teachers, there's even a couple of great teachers that I know, great guitar players that I know that teach as well, that I've seen some of the stuff that they've given other students that have come to me later on, and it's like, giving them really complicated things when they haven't mastered the basics yet. I find that just a bit weird. Some teachers find it obliged to give new stuff every week. Like if somebody's come in and paid their $50 or whatever, they feel like they should give them something new. Whereas I'm a bit more, if you haven't mastered the stuff I gave you last time, we're going to do it again. Because I'm really big believer in building a solid foundation and then, building that way rather than just feeling like I should give extra stuff to the students. But that's not to say that that's not a bad thing. I kind of get it. I was, I had the same feeling for a long time when I was teaching. So that would be, there you go. So I think, yes, it's totally possible to learn only online nowadays. Especially another side thing off that, would be the advent of Skype lessons, so that now you can look at doing a Skype lesson now and then with a teacher, just to kind of get a bit of a checkup with someone and make sure that you're going on the right path. It is kind of easier in the flesh, I must admit. I just did a lesson for a friend of mine earlier today, and there was a few things that was like, I wish you were just here so I could just point to the guitar neck and draw stuff on a page and you could see it right away, So there is, in-person lessons can be pretty useful, but you can totally learn without them now, I think. Hey Justin, how can I improve my picking? Any tips? That's such an open question. I'm afraid I just don't know where to start, because I don't know. Are you already picking at 160 and you want to get 16th notes and you want to go a bit faster, or you're just playing a pentatonic for the first time? So you need to be a little bit more specific with that question if you want to try again there, fella. Victor asks, any tips how to change between traditional A and D? Well, traditional A's got quite a few problems. Any of you that don't know, traditional A would be fingers 1, 2 and 3 all in a line, with the first finger on the 4th string. And the problem with that fingering is that the first finger is very far away from the 2nd fret. And that's how I learned to play an A chord. But to make an A chord sound good like that, you have to press very hard with your first finger. And I think swapping 1st and 2nd fingers over is a lot better way of playing an A chord now. I don't... for a little while I ummed and ahed whether I should teach only that other way and whether I should still keep traditional A in there, just because that was the way I learned. But it's loads easier to play it that way. You know, it's better. It's a better way of playing A chord. And it means changing to D and E is a lot easier. So I think, you know, for a beginner, I think it's a lot better prospect to use the fingering 2nd finger, 1st finger, 3rd finger for an A chord. If you do particularly want to stay with the other A for some particular reason, then you'll have to try and overcome the obstacles like not having an anchor finger. You'll just have to find a way around it, because I can't really help that much, because it's not the one that I recommend. Okay. Pavel asks, the action on my electric guitar is quite low, which is great, but the strings buzz sometimes. I don't hear it on the amp though. Is this a problem? So I don't like buzzy strings personally. A lot of the rock guys that have a really, really low action find that cool, and it means it's very low. I've never liked the buzzy sound, partly because I play a lot without an amplifier. I think there's benefit to practicing without an amplifier in that it really makes you draw the sound out of the instrument a bit, and you rely a bit more on your fingers than amps and effects. Having said that, it's also important to practice with an amp, particularly if you like playing rock guitar, because you need to get used to muting the right strings, and handling distortion and stuff is a different thing altogether. So practicing with an amplifier is a good idea as well. Yeah, hopefully that sorted that out. I'm just going to jump over to the chat feed for a second before I just do too many of these. Michael has asked about practical music theory. Does it run with the courses? It does. It doesn't sync up exactly with the course. It might do in the future. There might be a new version of it in the works, which fits with some other new stuff also in the works, but it's unlikely to be out until later this year, much later this year, like halfway or 3/4 through the year. So I'm sure you'll really enjoy it. Like, there's loads of people, if you go on the forum, that really enjoyed practical music theory, so I'm sure you would. And it's not going to break the bank either. I think $9.99 is a pretty reasonable price for that, because it'll work with you. Yeah, Razor there also mentioned string bending is bad with a low action, which is very true. If you've got a very low buzzy action and you do a string bend, very often the note just disappears. So that's something that you should be aware of when you have a low action. Curtis asks, how often should I clean my guitar? Whenever you feel like it. I usually clean the necks of my guitars when I change strings. I take all the strings off, I clean the neck with lemon oil, and then I've got this Diodario guitar cleaner spray stuff. I just give the body a quick wipe. Except the Telecaster, I don't tend to clean the body of that one. I clean the neck. I'm very fussy about my necks being nice and clean and not sticky. But some of my older vintage guitars, I just leave the body alone just to let it, like, you know, it's kind of a bit cool and grungy, like, you know. How often should I change my strings? I've just done a Q&A on a whole video just on that, Ben, so do you want to check that out instead? Okay, sometimes I can't help but hit pickguard with pick when downstrokes. It sounds awful, especially when you try to record it. Is there a way to avoid that? Okay, be aware that you're doing that and then not do it anymore. That's the answer. That said, embarrassingly, not listening to my own advice, when I play acoustic guitar, when I was strumming, my fingers were touching the fingerboard on my I think I said classical guitar, I meant just regular acoustic guitars. So I actually put felt, well, actually it was doubles Velcro, the felty side of the Velcro I put all over the fingerboard, which is why a lot of people ask about why that is, and it's just to stop my fingernails doing that if I'm strumming. But after I knew that it was a problem, it was kind of a quick fix and I was a bit lazy, but since then I've gone and practiced not making sure that I don't do it. So if you look on the newer acoustic lessons, there's none of that black stuff all over the pickguard, because I've just tidied up my technique. So the first step is being aware of the problem. Once you're aware of a problem, then you can start to try and fix it. If you're not even aware of it, you're never going to fix it. So that would be just think about it, be aware of it, and then try and stop yourself. Often a good thing is try to make the mistake. I think it's another one of those quick tips that I filmed ages ago. It's called something like try to make a mistake, which is when you deliberately try and watch yourself doing it, and then when you've watched yourself do it, you know what it is that you're doing wrong, so you can try and fix it. So I'd try and check that lesson out if you can. What strings do I prefer? Depends on the instrument. I play mostly Diodario strings, and I use XLs, 10 gauge on most of my electrics, sometimes 11s on my Gibson guitars, because the neck feels a bit shorter and I feel like it's easy to bend. Yeah, on acoustic guitar I use a mixture. It depends on what the guitar is. So I spend a bit of time exploring phosphor and phosphor bronze 80-20, and coated and non-coated, and I tried experimenting with which strings sounded better on each different guitar, which is kind of a luxury thing to be able to do that. But because I have a relationship with Diodario, I feel like I can change my strings a bit more often. But again, even still saying that, it's not that expensive to buy a few sets of strings. If you've got one guitar that you really love, an acoustic guitar for example, and you bought like 4 different sets of strings and you try all of them out like one after the other, it's going to cost you what, 20 quid, 25 quid. But considering the price of acoustic guitars, generally it's not that much, because it can have quite a big difference. So I'm definitely into the idea of experimenting, particularly between the bronze and phosphor bronze and stuff. There's a video I did on that on acoustic guitar, like a Q&A, not a Q&A, like a test thing where I played the different strings, and then you can guess which one you think is which. Don asks, why did I move to England? Because I got a scholarship to go to the Guitar Institute, the school, which was a scholarship from a Tasmanian arts funding body. They paid me to go to the school, covered my airfares and my tuition costs and stuff. And then after I finished studying at the school, I was quite enjoying living in England, and I managed to get a gig teaching at the guitar school where I'd just been a student. So I ended up teaching there, and I ended up staying because of that. Okay, back to my other page. Aditya, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, Funk Sage, hey, Funk Sage, that's a cool name. Even after, I'm assuming that's not your birth name. If it is your birth name, it's the coolest name ever. Even after a lot of playing, I am unable to play good enough to record myself. I have practiced a lot with the metronome. Self-doubt is crippling me. Any tips on overcoming this? Okay, so a little bit that kind of goes into what I was talking about before, about really concentrating and being focused on the task at hand. Now, if you're unable to record yourself because you're getting freaked out, nervous or whatever, start with stuff that you're totally prepared for, not something that's the hardest thing that you've ever done. So maybe program some drums and bass in a GarageBand or whatever it is that you're using, or just a metronome, and then practice yourself playing a C chord. Just go, literally, I'm sure you're able to go like. So record yourself playing that, get used to what it feels like playing that, and then maybe try and have a go at doing some strumming, or doing whatever it is that you fancy recording yourself doing. If it's funk, if your thing's on funk, start real simple. Maybe just going something just like properly simple like that, just a little groove, and then maybe go just build it up. So do real simple things and try and get used to the process of recording. If you find your mind getting a bit busy, try and get into the little zone where you're just concentrating on the thing that you're doing at that particular time. I'm getting really into this. The more I use this technique in my life in general, I'm finding it really helpful. Just if I'm talking to someone, concentrating on being in that moment with them. If I'm teaching you, I'm here thinking about this now, doing this and not like what's for dinner, or what, you know, finishing this lesson or getting that file done or updating this on the website, or what, you know, I'm trying to be in the zone thinking about what it is that we're doing. I think that's a really cool thing. Sebastian asks, when starting a new stage, should we immediately start learning a song with the new chords in it, or wait until we feel better about the chords and changes to and from them? That's a very good question, Sebastian. It would depend on your character a little bit. So different people kind of respond to different stuff different ways. You know, I guess probably you want to at least be able to play the chords and change between them a bit. Otherwise, playing the song is going to be really difficult. But saying that, some people really like the challenge of that sort of stuff, and the pressure of trying a new song in that way is might be good for them. So I'm not saying that you should or you shouldn't, but my gut feeling would be get used to the chords first of all, then start learning a song that's using those chords. That would be my gut feeling, but I might change my mind if I thought about it more. And definitely if you felt differently about it, it would be totally cool to you know, to approach it a different way, to approach it whatever way, whatever you like, you know. Klaus says, your bear sweater rocks. Oh, thank you. Son, where can I start a band? I play for only 6 months. Well, see if you can find some other people that that have been playing for 6 months and just get together and have a jam in a rehearsal studio. You know, there's in case you didn't know, all around the world in most big cities you're going to find a place that's a rehearsal studio. It's probably got like a drum kit and maybe a couple of guitar amps and a bass amp or something. So all the ones in London have got a notice board on it. So if you go to the rehearsal studio, you might want to put a notice board up and say, guitar player likes whatever music you like, likes Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne, wants to meet drummer and bass player for fortnightly get together purely for fun, or we want to start a band to start doing gigs, or, you know, whatever your plan is with it, you know, how long you've been playing for. And see if anybody emails you or phones you, and then meet up at that rehearsal studio and have a jam. You know, that's can be pretty terrifying, getting together with people that you've never met before for a play, but, you know, it's kind of fun too. You know, that's one of those sort of things, is just, you know, getting together with new people and making some music is a really fun thing. I generally do it through friends of friends personally, so I know, well, most of my friends are musicians really, so I'm kind of likely to ask people around my little circle if I'm looking for somebody to work with or whatever, you know. Josh asked, what's the tattoo on my left arm? That's a broken arrow, that one. It's not a mushroom. Everyone thinks it's a mushroom. It's a broken arrow. Okay, back to the doc. Kevin says, feel like I've practiced A minor pentatonic scales so much now, I'm stuck in a rut every time I'm improvising. It always sounds bluesy. I like blues a lot, but how do I break free and evolve my playing? Okay, I'm going to save that for the intermediate session, mate. It's a good question, so DJ, please leave it in or just move it in for a session later. Good question, but just not for the beginner part. Okay, Justin, could you please explain the difference between using the capo and not changing the chords in a song versus changing the chords to suit your voice? Well, Liz, aren't you a good one for picking a difficult question? Let me see if I can explain. Sorry, I'm going to have to think that one through for a second, and then let me see what I can come up with. So let's say that you're playing a song and it goes C, G, A minor, F. Okay, very common. Okay, so you've got C, G, A minor, F. I'm just writing it down so I don't start marking it up. I wrote it down, not helpful. Now, if you were changing the key to fit your voice, you might look at doing using a capo, for example. Now I'm just like, where's all my capos? Excuse me, there's one down there on the floor. So you might be sitting there going, da 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 da. And you're like, oh, that's too low. So you try putting the capo on the 3rd fret and you go da 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 da. That's better. Well, can I go a bit higher? Just, you know, make a maybe that's better. So you find the one that fits your voice using the capo. But what's important to realise, let's say if I moved it up to here. I'm playing now still the same chords, C, G, A minor, F. But the chords I'm actually playing, right, the actual pitch of them, this C chord, because it's so far up the neck, it actually sounds now like a G chord. So I'm playing a C shape with the capo at the 7th fret, and you'll hear that that's the same chord as playing a G. Okay, it sounds different because it's a different shape, but still the same chord, right? So I'm actually, by playing C, G, A minor, F, the chords I'm actually playing are G, D, E minor, and C. Okay, so I'm playing the reality G, D, E minor, C. So now if you'll hear if I can sing the same melody just to prove it actually. So if I go da 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 da, take the capo off, da 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 da, G, da D, E minor to C. Okay, now the relationship from one chord to the next chord has remained the same, whether I'm playing C, G, A minor, F, or G, D, E minor, C. Now, to explain how that is requires you to know some music theory. If you're doing my practical music course, you're going to learn about the chords on each scale degree, okay? And the C, G, A minor, F would be the same as saying it's a 1 chord, 5 chord, 6 chord, 4 chord. Okay, that's the pattern. And if we move that pattern to the key of G, we get G, D, E minor, C. Okay, so we're getting into theory realm, but that's the difference. Hopefully that's explained it. So you can see that by using the capo, first of all, I found the key, and then I looked at what the chords were and then played those chords in the open position. Doesn't always, I made it kind of easy for myself to try and explain it because it's a bit of a sticky kind of a question. Yeah, that's that one. Oh, good, very good question. It's just difficult. Okay, Greg. Speaking of equipment, would a Fender or Squier Mustang with a shorter scale be a good choice in a starter electric in comparison with a Strat or a full scale? I don't think that the difference in scale length is enough to make a massive difference. Maybe if you had very small hands, it might be slightly easier to play a Mustang. I've got a Mustang, a 64 Mustang, beautiful little thing, but I find it quite difficult to play because the neck is very narrow, and I find that I'd struggle to be able to fret the chords cleanly, so I don't tend to play it very often. I bring it out if I specifically want one of those quirky Mustang sounds. It's also a bit of a rat bag of a guitar. It goes out of tune a lot and stuff, so that goes more in my collector's box. But I don't generally think it's a good idea. No, I think you're better off with a Strat and just deal with it. Deal with the slightly bigger stretch. Okay, Sally. I think it's Sally. Salil. C. Sometimes I accidentally strum 5 strings for D chord. How to avoid this while fast strumming? I want to avoid this mistake without looking. E chord is okay as all strings are used. Okay, so another very good question, I might add. When you're strumming, when you're learning guitar, there are certain stages that you go through while you're learning guitar. And in my course, I try and teach you in a way that prepares you for the later stages well, even though it's not possibly the exact truth at the time. Okay? I think I explained that in the course, but maybe I don't make it quite clear enough. For example, I always teach beginners that they should keep the thumb round the back of the neck when they're practicing their chords right at the beginning for all of your chords. But the truth is, when I'm playing a D chord, I'm nearly every time my thumb's going to be sneaking around the top. and touching the thicker string. I'm just making sure that my camera is good for this and you can see it, and you can. So my thumb is going to be reaching over the top, right? When you're practicing, you should be doing like this and being a good, you know, keeping the thumb around the back. But later on, as you play more, you're going to find that the thumb sneaks over a bit more. And if I'm playing a D chord, the thumb is almost certainly going to be covering the thicker string. And actually the fifth string doesn't really matter too much if you play it. Doesn't sound bad, right? I played this, or if I played this, I'm pretty sure none of you are going to be like, oh god, he's got an A on the bottom, right? Because A is actually a note in the chord. This note here that you play with the first finger is the note A. Same note as the open fifth string. So very often you might want to play that fifth string, okay? I'm not saying that you shouldn't be able to not do it. And if I'm strumming without the thumb, I should be able to. I was waiting for myself to muck it up then and I didn't, but I should be able to hit just the thinnest 4 strings. But that's taken a lot of practice to be able to do that, and it's not something that you know, I would count on being able to do every time, right? So thumb would just sneak over and mute the thicker string. Now, why don't I teach it that way is a perfectly valid next question, so I'll ask it for you. Now the reason is that I want you to do your thumb around the back is because this, if you use the thumb like that, where it's wrapped right around, you're not developing this muscle here. Whereas when you're doing that, you're developing this muscle just here, okay? When you're holding it there and playing all of your open chords, right? You're developing that muscle. Now that muscle's a really important one when you play bar chords, right? You can see there that gripping a bar chord like that, it's really important to have a good grip and to have that muscle working really well. And if you're not prepared for it, if you've done all of your chords, your open chords like this with a full, like a baseball grip, yeah, so I can play my chords while I'm holding the guitar up, kind of thing, because it's like gripping a baseball bat. If you learned your chords like that, when it came to F, you got no hope of all of doing that, because that muscle there that needs to grip is just not, it ain't going to be able to do it, not at all. So that's why I teach in my beginner stuff to keep the thumb around the back. Helps you develop for your bar chords and for your power chords. And then later on, I start introducing this idea of the thumb maybe sneaking over. For most people, it just kind of happens on its own, to be completely honest. It's a slightly different kind of a grip. But so the answer is, don't worry about it if you accidentally hit the fifth string. If you're a real beginner, don't worry about it too much. Try and avoid the string, particularly the thicker string, but you should be able to do that. The thing with the D chord, if you're aiming for the 4th string when you're strumming, you might occasionally hit the 5th string, but it doesn't matter. What you don't want is accidentally hitting the thicker string. That would sound horrible. So, but you're probably unlikely to do that. You're likely to be more focused on the 4th string, I would imagine. That's what I think. Anyway, okay. Second inversion, yeah, you could call it a second inversion, but it doesn't really matter. Justin, is that guitar Justin a lot of money? Yeah, probably. I mean, it depends on what a lot is. It's not the most expensive guitar I own. It was a couple of £1,000 though, so it's definitely not a cheap guitar. It's a very nice guitar, but it's not like the same sort of money that you pay for a vintage instrument. Okie dokie. Are your guitar videos your main income source? I'm just interested in how this whole YouTube thing works. So I've got loads of different incomes going on. It's not really the point of these kind of things. It's not a business chat, it's a guitar chat. But I can make a living out of the whole thing, but it wouldn't be just YouTube videos. Okay. Going back to my little Google Sheet doc thing here. Hang on. Excuse me, guys, if I have to do this. Sometimes I'm going to kill the little chat thing there as well. Okay. Do you recommend a beginner learning a classical position rather than the casual position? It seems easier. That too, if you want to get into metal. No, I don't recommend learning in the classical position. I know there are some. We had this conversation last week, I think, as well. If you sit like that, and there are guys that play like it. There are some very good guitar players that play like it, but I don't It never, well, it doesn't look cool for a start, I don't think. Looks a bit weird. And the benefits are marginal. I'm just trying to think of a good excuse of how it kind of works. And the strumming's okay. Kind of gives you nicer access to the neck there. I mean, it's a personal taste thing, I guess. You know, I always just I feel like the cutout of a guitar sits here, whereas when it sits there, I mean, it still sits actually in the cutout spot. I don't know. It feels weird to me like that. I play classical guitar that way usually, but even these days I tend to play classical guitar this way, just because that's how I kind of play guitar, I guess. I find the angle thing just doesn't work for me, but it should definitely be personal taste. So maybe I shouldn't tell people that they shouldn't play that way. Uncertain how to answer that question properly, because I'm sure that I've given this thought before and decided that it was definitely better for people to learn this way, and now I can't think of the reason why that is. But I'm sure I thought of it. It wasn't just a random decision that I decided to recommend this way. I thought about it, you know. Yeah, that's that. Justin, somehow I've picked up playing G chord with my second, third and fourth fingers. Would it be best to change to the normal way or keep it as it is? If you can play with fingers 2, 3 and 4, that's perfectly fine. There are some, the G chord, there are lots of times where that's actually better. So if you're playing a lot of C chord, going to G like that's loads easier than going from C to G like that. If you play G chord with fingers 1, 2, 3 and 4, so third and fourth fingers on the thinnest 2 strings, that is also a good way of playing the G, particularly because it changes nicely to a D chord. That kind of thing, it happens. That's a very, very common movement. So my recommendation would be stick with your fingers 2, 3 and 4, that's fine. But also maybe investigate using fingers 1, 2, 3 and 4. Because there's certain things about it that are good. Okay, Sarah asks, hey Justin, should I strum and up strum exactly between the beats? So, the difference, if you're playing exactly between the beats, then you're playing eighth notes. So you're going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. If you play the and slightly late, the up strum, so 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, so it's different. Here's straight, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Here's this one called a swing or a shuffle. 1 and 2 and. Now when you do that, you really actually, it becomes closer to being a triplet, like 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, i.e. dividing a beat into 3 and playing the down strum on the first one and the up strum on the 3, like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now that's common. You get this thing called a shuffle, and there's varying degrees of shuffleness, okay, between playing straight and playing with a really heavy shuffle, like that's a really heavy shuffle. You could have a blues is always going to be shuffly. What's a better example? There's a bit of a shuffle going on, but it's not a really heavy one. So it depends on the song. The best way about learning the different shuffles and that's the realm of this thing I call time feel. So time feel is that the differences between mathematically correct and humanly nice, because mathematically correct is kind of cool in like dance music or whatever, but in most other sorts of music there's a humanness of imperfection which we relate to, particularly rhythmically. So, you know, a really great drummer doesn't necessarily, no, he doesn't play mathematically perfectly, right? So, well, probably doesn't. And there's something about that humanness that makes it really good and really dancey and funky or whatever. But that said, that you get guys like Dr. Dre who can program drums that have that same feeling. But when they're programming drums to have that, they're not programming them with exact subdivisions of the beat, right? They're making things slightly early or slightly late to get a little bit of this kind of shuffle thing going on. So, yeah, it depends. The best way to do it, as I mentioned, is, well, I don't think I answered the question properly. The best way to do it is to play along with recordings that you really like. So finding tracks that have got a really nice feeling that you enjoy. I think I talked last week about that, If It Makes You Happy by Sheryl Crow, which I think there's a lesson coming out in a couple of weeks for that song. Take a Load Off Sally, what's that called? The band. What's the name of that song? The Weight. If you check that out, the live version from The Last Waltz, that's one of the nicest feels that I've ever heard. The drums in that song are just so laid back and beautiful. That's kind of the standout one for me. It's just so wicked, the feel, the time feel of it. So, you know, playing along with those sort of things is a really good way of absorbing that kind of feel. You know, I think that's pretty important. Feeling makes a good guitar player. Don't play like a robot, says Lars. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're not playing like a robot, but you got to learn. It's not just random haphazard mistakes. It's learned. It's got to be a particular feeling. Okay. Bill asks, my teacher is going to play two movable chords, F and B flat. Is this a big thing in reaching all other chords? It is. So Billy, that's the difference for me between intermediate guitar players and beginner guitar players, is that intermediate guitar players learn the movable chord shapes, which is an E-shaped bar chord and an A-shaped bar chord are the two common ones. There's three other ones which are a lot more advanced, but for me, for an intermediate guitar player, you want the E-shape and A-shape bar chords, which most commonly are learned are F chord and B or B minor chord. So I think you said B flat, but that's kind of the step up between beginner and intermediate. That's how I see it. But again, as I say every week, beginner and intermediate and advanced and all that stuff is just an arbitrary decision that I've made to define my levels of my lessons, but it's not universal. Should the fretboard be out of your sight while you're playing? Asks Aura. Aurora, is it? You guys got cool tags. I don't tend to look at the fingerboard much when I play. I mean, sometimes I do. It depends on the piece. If I'm jumping around a lot, I might look at it. But you definitely shouldn't be doing this, if that's what you mean. You shouldn't be looking at the front of it. You should just be looking at kind of the top view and being able to see a little bit of it, maybe. That's kind of what I think is the right thing. Out of sight. I mean, what I find is if I don't look at the fingerboard, I tend to rely on my ears a little bit more, which is good. So I tend to, if I'm looking at the guitar, I can tend to see shapes and maybe allow my fingers to go to the places, to the shapes that they're used to going to. And I'd prefer to make my ear do the work. So I tend to try and rely on my ears more. But there's no harm in looking at it either. I know a few guitar players that watch their fingers all the time, and usually those guys have a period where they try to learn not to do that, but I don't really think it's that bad a thing to do. Okie dokie, what have we got here? Okay, Ashton asks, my wrist and index finger are hurting when playing power chords. Is this normal? Will it go away with practice? So there's a difference between pain and sore, which I feel like I should differentiate first. If you've got any pain in your hand, particularly in the back of your wrist, you might be looking at carpal tunnel syndrome, which is very, very bad. Well, not very bad. You're not going to die or anything, but it might stop you playing guitar so much. If you've got any pain, you should go and see a doctor. If it's sore, if you're like that thumb muscle is sore, particularly when you're learning power chords, that would be really normal when you're learning power chords and bar chords, for that muscle between your thumb and your first finger to get sore. That's normal. Sore like you've just been to the gym or done, you know, done some sort of exercise that you've not done before and the muscles get a bit fatigued. That kind of soreness is fine. It's even good because it means it's probably on its way to healing. Healing and growing. And when muscle grows, you kind of destroy you don't destroy, you tear the muscle fibers and then it regrows with more muscle. That's how you develop your muscles. When you go to the gym and you do heavy weights, you're kind of making very small tears in the muscle. As far as I understand it, I'm not a biologist, but that's my understanding of how it works. So when the muscle's really sore, it's because it's got little tears in it, and if you allow the muscle to heal, it'll grow back stronger with more muscle. So that's how I think it works. Okay, just a couple more beginners one because I'm running out of breath and I need to have a little little slowdown. Okay, Andreas asks, when I start learning to play, should I sit down or stand? Does it matter either way? Well, it depends. I have my guitar positioned in such a way that it's the same place when I sit down or stand up, so it doesn't make any difference to me whether I sit or stand. I know a lot of guys learn sitting down because it's more comfortable, but if you're going to the point where you're going to go out and start doing some gigs, I definitely recommend having some time where you practice standing up, so it's not like you're standing up for the first time on stage in front of people, because that's that kind of thing, the 6 P's that I talked about earlier. The prior practice prevents piss poor performance. Okay, that's, you know, an important kind of a thing there, because you don't want to be suddenly standing up in front of people playing for the first time, because it's not going to feel right. You're going to give yourself a nervous sort of a situation. So definitely some practice standing up, I think, would be a really good thing. And I'm going to do one more, because there's one more on my little sheet here. Adieta? Oh, it's Funk Sage again. Is it normal to get stuck in a plateau for a year or more? It's becoming harder to push because it becomes frustrating. Also, what's the most effective way to practice with backing tracks? If you get stuck in a plateau, often commonly called a rut, my recommendation is to try some new things, because we all have it. I have it as well, where you just feel like, oh, I'm not getting any better, and you know, sometimes it's not practicing the right stuff, but usually it can just be boredom. You know, that you just got bored of yourself and bored of what you're doing. So what I do when I'm feeling like that is I try something completely different. I'll just go and try a different style or a different thing, or change up, you know, try an open tuning, try slide guitar, try classical guitar, try jazz guitar, try lap steel, try playing piano for a bit. I don't know, just try doing something that's musically very different. And I usually find that kind of knocks me back into a place where I start enjoying music again, and then I can get back to what I was working on before. And definitely, if you've not looked at it, definitely checking out my Effective Practice series would be a really, really good idea. Because once you help define your goals, it can really help with the enthusiasm. If you get into, you know, if you know what it is that you should be practicing and how you should be practicing it and that kind of thing, that can be really helpful. So definitely.